Hi, welcome back to Just Vetting, the podcast where we go beyond the clinic walls to talk business, leadership, and the real stories behind practice ownership. Today, I'm joined by someone who's not only a standout veterinarian, but also a resilient and forward-thinking business owner, Dr. Ashley Staycheff, owner of Copley Fairlawn Veterinary Clinic in Ohio. Ashley's journey into ownership wasn't your typical deal. In fact, her acquisition came with some unexpected twists, both operationally and legally, which we're going to get into. Ashley, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Right. Hey, so before we get into your practice acquisition and the twists and turns that we worked on together, tell me a little bit about your journey into veterinary medicine. What led you into veterinary medicine and up to the point of being an associate and thinking about being a practice owner?
Yeah, so typical kid that loved animals, told my mom when I was 3 I wanted to be a vet and never let that go. So went to vet school. I went to Ross and then came back to Ohio State to do my clinics and said I would never, ever own a practice because I never wanted to deal with the business aspect of things. I just wanted to save the animals. And so I started as an associate veterinarian. Next hospital, I was a medical director. Hospital after that, I was a hospital director, and then here we are. Now, 12 years later, I own my own clinic.
So how old were you when you thought you wanted to be a veterinarian?
3.
Yep. So I ask almost, I think everybody who comes on here, I think it's almost unanimous. 10 years or younger. It's and I have kids in college and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. So it's just, I'm like, what about a veterinarian? I think their time has already passed. It's good. Oh my gosh, it's great. So let's rewind. Let's just think about it. So let's go back to, you're an associate. What had you, what changed your mind about going from being an associate to being a practice owner? You even said, I never thought I wanted to be a practice owner. What made you change your mind there?
The opportunity popped up and I had some complications with previous clinics and some discrepancies on just the way I wanted to run practice and the way that I wanted animals taken care of, people taken care of, and a lot of push from my husband, who is a business owner, and said, I will help you with all the business things that you don't know. And just picked up books and started reading and trying to educate myself the best that I could so that I could be the best practice owner. And really my goal with this clinic is to change the way the veterinary narrative is, because everywhere you see it's just bad and sad and corporate takeovers, and I just want to rewrite the story.
Right. So it sounds like your biggest fear was, the veterinary medicine, no problem. It's the ownership and yes. the issues with your husband's like, hey, we got this. I can help you out.
Yes, right. Without a doubt.
So it's interesting because you have clients who are, they're associates. They don't want to own. Then the ones that kind of dip their toe into practice ownership. And then I work with other clients who, on the tail end, I've been doing this 25 years. I've been doing it 30 years, 35. And it's interesting because when you go through that life cycle, it's not the veterinary medicine that they're tired of or stressed about. Mm-hmm. It's the practice ownership at that back end, sometimes where they're overwhelmed for a variety of different issues. One of my clients even referred to it as an administrative noose at one point in time.
Yeah.
Love the practice of veterinary medicine, but removing the administrative noose of the business side, dealing with staff and all the other stuff, was an issue for him. So it's just, it makes sense on the flip side with somebody like you. There's a genuine fear there about, hey, do I want to own? Can I own?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Nobody wants to fail. And and nobody wants to be the person that everyone looks to when things get rough or hard. And you have to be able to talk through it with them. And being that person is a little bit scary. The business side is scary. But I have obviously my husband helping me with the administrative work. And I just happened to come across an incredible practice manager. So I am beyond blessed for her.
Yeah, so that's interesting that first of all, yeah, right. You got two aces in the hole, right? Your husband and the practice manager. I listen. There are potential like these corporate buyers out there that'll come to us and they want the practice. They like but they're going after the practice manager or hospital administrator at some of these practices because they need them.
Yes.
So you're real fortunate you have somebody really good that can help you out in that regard. So how long has it been now since you've closed on your practice? How long have you been a practice owner?
10 months.
10 months. Not even a year yet. 10 months. Wow. And you're still smiling. See that? It's
yes.
Good. No, seriously, it's great. And I know when we were getting toward the end of your the closing, as you can appreciate, a lot of moving parts that were going on. I guess going back to before you got the keys and became an owner, thinking back, so you made the decision, hey, I can do this. So you reach out to the seller, and you're talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the seller and in the transaction initially, which was a little unique in your situation, because the way they were operating.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know them at all. We just happened to. My husband religiously reads the JAVMA articles for practices for sale, despite me not wanting to ever be an owner. And this one came about, which is close to our house. And so we reached out to them. I did not know him, never practiced with him before. And the issues with him and selling the practices, he didn't want to tell his clients. He didn't want to tell them his staff. He didn't want to tell his clients. He just wanted me to buy it, come in, and then one day he was gone. And that came with a lot of backlash for us here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not unusual so much for the staff when you get to us. Most sellers will say, "Hey, I want to make sure you're buying my practice before you get to before we introduce you to the staff." But in your situation, they took it to an extreme. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a transfer of the goodwill, introductions, in order to make the successor a success.
Yes.
Which I think what you're bringing up, from what I recall, that was one of several issues that we were trying to navigate at the time, and they didn't have really counsel involved on the other side.
Right.
Which was really unique. I think I can count on not even one hand, but on a few fingers on the transactions that we worked on where somebody's selling a practice, and this was a pretty substantial practice, where they just refused to get an attorney involved. Mm-hmm. And it just made, how did you feel about that? How did that make your life in that sense?
Miserable, because I felt like I was doing everything I could. I wish I would have seeked you out sooner, but I feel like I did my due diligence by trying to seek out the right team, the right banking, the loan officers, and from their perspective, they didn't have that. So it was a little bit tough because I felt like a lot of it fell on you, which wasn't quite fair because you were representing me.
Right. And then it falls on you and your attorney, and then it requires our time and your money because he doesn't want to go out and get somebody. And it's just good for our listeners to understand that. Actually, so you're not alone. We have another deal we're starting on where one of the three owners, where my client's buying the interest out. Right now, he's refusing to get an attorney, and I'm just like, oh boy. And people, just because I'm a lawyer, it's not that I want to see a lawyer on the other side. It just you understand what needs to gets involved. It just helps move the transaction along.
Absolutely.
So I guess looking back, before again you get the keys, you're thinking about buying. You want to buy your obviously your husband comes to you. Hey, we think about looking at this practice. Well, what are you thinking about over these 10 months? What could you have done differently? Is there anything you could have done differently? Um, I guess between now and then that would have changed or made the acquisition process more streamlined or easier for you, other than him hiring a lawyer?
To be brutally honest, are we allowed to talk about the bad things that happened?
Yeah, listen, it's I, well, I guess in terms of bad things that have happened, there was things that after the closing that you became aware of, is what you're referring to.
So, but well before the close,
Right. So go
so
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I would have definitely not voiced what I was doing. I come from a background of, if I'm telling you something, I want to be honest with you. And so to my previous employer, and I wanted to say, I'm looking at this practice, interested in buying it, because I was his hospital director. So mainly ran that hospital. I wanted that person to know. And then having another buyer all of a sudden, when the practice had been on the market for a year and a half and nobody had looked at it, it was a stab in the back, and it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think from the beginning, I would not talk about it the way that I did so openly. So I wouldn't have to deal with that. Luckily, the sellers were great with me and luckily accepted my offer. But I think that originally that was probably the hardest thing to go through, because you trust somebody and then it turns out to not be what you expected.
Right. So it's almost like no good deed goes unpunished, and you were just
Yeah.
trying to be upfront. And it's interesting because there is a balance between trying to do the right thing and also, a business deal and business transaction. How much should you disclose? And it's some people have better relationships with others, and I think to your point, you were just caught off guard. Nobody
Yeah.
had a good relationship with with the practice owner, and then they go ahead and they try to use that against you, and you're like, what are we doing here?
Right. Right.
So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. But besides that, the team that I got left with, so I kept the entire team on. I didn't send any of them away or fire them. I rehired all of them, and I got blessed with the most incredible team on the planet, and have since added in 10 months 2 new doctors and about 4 or 5 new staff members. So I've just been really lucky with great staff, and my goal for the clinic was no drama, no gossip, no toxicity. Those are my 3 rules. And I'm trying to create a culture around that, because we have enough problems in vet med, and I want the core people that we have to really, really uphold those values. And so far, so good.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I was looking at your website earlier today, and I read it on there. Your team will do anything, I emphasize anything, for your patients. Now, what's the moment when you think your team went above and beyond, and how does that shape your culture? And I guess that it comes down from the leadership from you and what your expectations are of your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to me coming on, the hospital wasn't fear-free certified, or they didn't really know a lot about fear-free. So one thing that I always am very cognizant about is the experience that the patient has from the time they walk in the door to the time they leave. And whether that means just sitting down with the patient on the floor and having a chat with their parents, and that's all that happens because they're too nervous, and then we go home with some meds and try again the next time. That's what we do, because we care more about their experience than pushing them to the limits just to get something done. And I really value high touch clinics where we can have our hands on the pets and we can sit down and have a conversation with the owners, because at the end of the day, the owners are spending a lot of money on their pets. I mean, it's not cheap. And I want you to understand what is going on. I want you to understand what your options are. And I want you to understand that this is exactly what I would do for my own pet if I were in your position. And that takes time, but we're always willing to do it with any owner. And if you come back in my treatment area, all you see are all my technicians loving on, rolling around the floor with the dogs and treats everywhere and just like making it a happy experience. And I think that that really makes a huge difference. And we've been told it does from our clients.
Yeah, I love that. Being a dog owner myself, my dog's part of our family, and to know that she would get that experience behind closed doors when she's being treated makes me feel good as an owner.
Yeah.
Because she obviously there's a big there's a lot of tension, hesitancy on part of the dogs when they're coming, going to somewhere new, or even I'm sure going to outside of the house. I know mine, I take her to get groomed, or I take her to the veterinarian, and she's got a good relationship with ours. You still even leaving the house, knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
You can see, it's just like, I know you don't want to go,
they
but
know.
It's okay, They know. It's great, they know. Yeah. So going back to the first 30 days, obviously you said you inherited a great staff, which is great. Anything that jumps out at you that surprised you in saying, okay, I got the keys. What could I have done differently? Anything that jumped out at you, or just like a smooth transition?
It wasn't a smooth transition, but I was really surprised how willing the staff was to quote unquote do things the way that I was used to doing them. Because the clinic prior to me was more of a high volume, not low quality, but just high volume. And so my standards of medicine are very much high quality, less volume, so that I can have that relationship with the pet parents, and the communication is always there, and they really understand what's going on, and the pets have a good experience. And the entire staff was open to that type of medicine and practicing that way, which really surprised me. Even when we were triple booked in the beginning, and now we only have, one column of appointments per doctor. But when I was triple booked all by myself, everyone, even the clients, were really willing to just sit down, even if they had to wait, so that they knew that they were getting the experience that was just a little bit different than what they had before. But in the first 30 days, I had so many people tell me, thank you. For the first time, I truly understand what's actually going on with my dog. And that makes what I do worth it.
And that is great. And it screams a culture to me, the culture that your practice is embraced through your leadership. I think, in this industry, especially, I always say, money is important to everybody. It's human nature. Money is important. That's what we need for our families and our retirement. But, just as important, I find in this industry with our clients, culture. Whether you're an associate joining a practice, somebody like you who's going to acquire a practice and the staff, or somebody looking to transition their practice like you at some point in time, fast forward into the future, I'm almost guaranteed one of the questions you will ask, hopefully it'll be me, I'm still around,
Yeah.
say, hey, in terms of how are they going to treat my staff? How is that buyer going to treat my staff?
Yeah.
Where you don't see that, someone's going to buy a widget company. They're looking for the highest dollar possible, and they're like, I'll see you. Peace out. I'm out of here. Here, it is really important. And you're seeing, within the 10 months I'm sure your staff really appreciated that too. Maybe you got to spend a little more time with clients, and time is money. But look at the risk, the reward you're getting as a result of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's boosts their confidence. It's boosts the way that they talk to clients. It's boosts the client experience, which is super important to me. And at the end of the day, it just builds relationships with people that I want to be with them for the life of their pet and then their next pet.
Right. How do you balance being now the boss, you're 10 months in, being the boss, and also being, a hands-on veterinarian, and with such an experienced staff? Like, how do you juggle the different balls now, as opposed to just going in, and working and leaving?
More time, quicker paces on things, and honestly a really good practice manager. I worked with my practice manager I worked with her as an assistant when she started in veterinary medicine 5 years ago, and immediately saw the potential in what she could be. And so the second I was able to hire her, I did. And she has absolutely filled that role in such an incredible way.
Yeah, you keep going back to the practice manager, and in a good way, because it's so critical for successful practices.
Absolutely.
In order to really run efficiently, to have someone they can, you have somebody like yourself you can trust and who knows what they're doing, the staff respects, so you can do your job the best that you can, and knowing your practice is being run the way you want it to be being run.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give, your younger self, another veterinarian, somebody coming out of vet school, thinking about down the road, hey, maybe I do want to own a practice. What is there anything that you could have done sooner before you became a practice owner that would have helped you become, I know you're only 10 months into it, but any advice you can give to your younger self or another veterinarian?
Yeah, I think learning more about business, which they really don't teach you any of that in vet school. You're learning how to be a good veterinarian, which is wonderful, but you're not learning how to be a good business owner. So I think learning a lot more about business, and then getting a team and together before you start that process. I wish I would have done that sooner, because I think had I had my core team of people, an advisor, you, loan officer, your whole team of people to help you through the process, it would have made it a little bit easier for me to do that, because you guys are way more knowledgeable than I am in all, and then you have everyone in each of their little facets. But learning more about the business aspect rather than focusing on the veterinary medicine aspect. We all go to conferences every single year, and every single year I focus all of my attention on veterinary medicine.
Wait a minute, nobody's listening to me speak when I do a presentation? Damn.
I wish I went to a few of your lectures before a year ago.
So, breaking down what you just said, and it gets said all the time. So two things, the business side of things. I know veterinary schools, they had the VBMA, they're trying to implement business components in vet school, but better than anybody. I talked to vet students, and they're just like, listen, I think I want to hear what you have to say, but it goes in this ear and out the other, because they're so busy and just focused. There's just not enough bandwidth there for them at that stage in their career. Then when you come out and you start practicing, it's just finding that time. That is something I hear over and over on the business side. I wish I could have done something, something differently. And I'm not really sure what the fix there is. But I don't know how you change it, at vet school where I've spoken at different vet schools, and the students really receptive, but they're pretty honest with me afterwards. They're like, this is great, but I just want to graduate and get a job. So,
and I think it's hard to. I think one way that could help change it in the future, and I'm hoping to see it with vet schools in the future, is they don't allow small animal and large animal tracks now because they want us to figure out what we want to do. But there are some of us, believe it or not, that know that I don't ever want to touch a cow or a horse ever in my career. So I don't need to learn about it. Give me a couple business classes instead. That probably would have done a lot more for me.
That's a great, that's, great advice. And, it's funny. Law school is very similar in that way. They don't want to fix what they think is not broken. So you're in your contracts class, first year of law school, you're reading a case from the 1800s about contracts, but why don't you give me a contract to take a look at so I can actually see what a darn contract looks like in my contract class? They don't want to do that. So I get it. And, whatever, I get it. The second thing you talked about is your team. And one of the first things I talk about in any of my presentations is team. And then also what well, the first thing I'm asking a client, whether you're usually, you're buying or you're selling some type of transaction, who's your team? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Who's your accountant? Who is your lender? Well, I have somebody on the corner from the, and it's not that I'm looking to take business away from them, but you know exactly what we're talking about here because they're experienced, they understand the issues. They're sort of talking the same language, and you're just trying to mitigate time lapses in these deals, which I find time is the biggest thing that kills these deals because somebody doesn't know what they should know because they don't have the experience in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that if I had that team earlier, things would have gone. I totally agree with you. There wouldn't be so many lapses in time because they know what they're doing and they would have been able to answer questions that I just couldn't.
What do you know? Well, you're 10 months in. I'm so excited that things are going great. Practice is growing.
Thank you.
I guess what do you think will be one of your biggest challenges, and then just one of the challenges in the industry overall? I have something in mind. I talk about on a daily basis. I'm curious to get your insight.
Is it hiring a vet because it can't find another one?
I call them unicorns. You can't find them. It's like because everybody's looking for them. You can't get them.
Yeah. I got so lucky with the 2 that I found when I started, and since then I've been looking relentlessly every day and cannot find another.
Yeah, it is really hard. And then sometimes when I'm, this is a balance too. It's not just exclusive to the veterinary profession. I think when I talk to colleagues, accountants, other lawyers, other professionals, I just think, a younger generation, I hate to pick on them because I have 3 young adult daughters. And I'm hoping to change, making sure they want to work hard, but they want to work less and get paid more. Whereas somebody like you, myself, you're coming up through the ranks. It's like, okay, what else can I do? Give me more. Give me more.
Yes.
And that has been frustrating for a lot of us, and we kind of got to adjust to that because it's almost the norm with a lot of the younger generation.
Yeah, it's hard to understand when we've been doing something for so long in such a straight and narrow way and then trying to see where they're coming from. And I totally want mental health and veterinary medicine to get better, and I see everywhere they're coming from, but it's a little bit hard when you're working so hard and then someone wants to work a lot less but make a lot more money.
Right. What I'm seeing too is, I think some of them. A good point. A lot. The culture is really important to them.
Yeah.
And mentorship. So if you're trying to compete with the corporates of the world, practices like yourself, you're already implementing an excellent culture. And if you're able to also, find somebody, like you said, you're lucky, and you can provide them with that mentorship, hopefully that's going to have some tethers, tied to them where they're not going to want to leave. They're like, oh, wow. Yeah, maybe I can make 10, 15, 20 grand more somewhere else. But I know it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I stay here. I'm going to learn. And who knows what the future may be if I'm staying here rather than going to corporate where, some of the experiences, I don't want to paint a broad brush. It's not always a pleasant experience for everybody.
Yep. Yeah. And I agree completely. That's what I'm waiting for because I love to teach. I've spent 12 years learning everything I can to be able to pass on that knowledge to somebody. And I loved being a medical director, training new doctors in surgery, dentistry, internal medicine. And so I have that to offer. And I think our culture is really great too. So I just need the right person to come along.
Sounds like it. Seriously. Listen, Ashley, it's great to see you. I'm so happy that you're thriving. I'm not surprised at all. Like I said at the beginning, you're special and resilient. You were you're the one who drove your deal. You're like, I'm making this happen. Whenever we hit a road bump, you're like, I'm going to make this happen. But you needed that drive in order to get over some of those hurdles that we faced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other advice, tidbits you want to share before we sign off?
I
Anybody?
think just that don't be afraid of practice ownership. I think some vets coming fresh out of school, they're a little bit afraid of practice ownership because we don't know a lot about it coming out of vet school. But if you have your confidence in your veterinary skills, the rest will just follow. I mean, and be afraid to take a chance on or don't be afraid to take a chance on yourself, because a lot of people are. I was afraid to take a chance on myself, and I did it, and so far so good.
It's great advice. I think your husband would be proud of you for saying that.
Yeah.
See that? He's like, see, I told you.
Yeah, that's what he's gonna say.
We don't have too many opportunities to say that. You know, I know that in my house. No, seriously, that's great. It's great advice, and more associates or even vet students should really take heed to that, because the ones that I talk, a lot of them don't want to do it. They're afraid, kind of like, just afraid. But it's great advice. And I'm glad you shared. So, listen, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate your time. All right, it's great seeing you, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
It was so good to see you. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.